26th of October, 1942. The morning sky over the Santa Cruz Islands is a hard metallic blue. Aboard USS Enterprise, CV-6, crews crouch behind steel, waiting for the whistle of the next dive. The carrier has already lived through Midway, already fought off Eastern Solomons. Today, she carries the flag of Rear Admiral Thomas C. Kincaid, Task Force 16, and the sea is filling with enemy shadows. Sirens rise. Val dive bombers fall out of the sun, black crosses flickering on their wings as they roll into attack. The first near miss throws green water across the flight deck. The next finds steel. Two bombs strike home before the wave breaks apart, smoke boiling up through torn planking as damage control teams run into heat and darkness. Across the horizon, her partner USS Hornet, CV-8, is mortally hit and will not come back. By noon, the ocean is littered with oil, foam, and drifting rafts. The Americans are still here. Hornet is finished. Enterprise is not. By dusk, she is the only operational U.S. fleet carrier left in the South Pacific, scorched, patched, and somehow steady on the wind. The crew rigs screens, clears the deck, and turns into the seas again, because the next battle is already forming ahead. Real doi pu. Verified dates. Zero fiction. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell, so you never miss the next mission. Enterprise was built for a different war, and then had to learn the one she got. Commissioned at Newport News on 12th of May 1938, the Yorktown-class carrier entered service under Captain Newton H. White. Jr. shifted to the Pacific in 1939, and, by chance and readiness, was at sea during the attack on Pearl Harbor. 70ers. 7th of December, 1941. 3 days later, her airmen found and sank the Japanese submarine I-70, the first confirmed U.S. Navy warship kill of the Pacific War. These dates set her rhythm, already moving when others were still getting underway. From the outset, Enterprise fought as a system. She carried early U.S. fleet radar, part of the Navy's rapid adoption of CXM, CXM-1 air search sets that began entering service in 1940-41, and built a fighter direction culture around it. Radar did not win battles by itself. It bought minutes, and minutes let fighter directors stack a defense. That is the causal chain that will run through this story. Sensors, direction, survivability. For context on the Navy's first production radars and their 1940-41 installations across carriers and capital ships, see NHHC's radar references and technical histories. In April 1942, Enterprise showed what mobility plus nerve could do. Under Vice Admiral William F. Halsey, Task Force 16, Enterprise, CV-6, Screening Hornet, CV-8, pushed deep into the Western Pacific to launch the Doolittle Raid on 18th of April, 1942. The Army's B-25s lifted from Hornet's deck and hammered Tokyo and other targets. The Navy covered them out and home. The operation's purpose, as the Navy later summarized, was material and psychological. Shock the enemy's confidence and force redeployments. Strategically, that is exactly what happened. Japan diverted assets, compressed timetables, and set conditions for risk at Midway. Inputs. Effect. A carrier thrust of 2 decks on 18th April helped bend adversary planning by June. 2 months later came the hinge. In the Battle of Midway, 4 to 6th June 1942, Enterprise air groups, with Yorktowns, found and fatally struck Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and, by afternoon, counterstrikes Hiryu. The Navy's own commemorative panel states it plainly. On June 4th, 3 Japanese carriers were hit and sank. Hiryu followed after U.S. dive bombers found her later that day. Midway mattered because it amputated Japan's elite carrier air, a fact measured not only in tonnage lost, but in trained deck crews and aircrew cadres that could not be replaced in the calendar remaining. Cause, effect. Carrier losses at Midway forced Japan to fight Guadalcanal with fewer decks, thinner air groups, and a training base already under stress. Enterprise then entered her trial by endurance. The Guadalcanal months. In the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, 24 August 1942, she absorbed multiple bomb hits that wrecked portions of her flight deck and killed and wounded men topside. Yet damage control parties contained fires, shored bulkheads, and restored enough flight operations to keep her in the campaign. NHHC's Eastern Solomons page and the Enterprise War Damage Dossier record the sequence and date. Bomb damage, 19.8, Setan 24 Diog 1942. Flight deck hits, elevator casualties, and emergency repairs that returned the ship to fight. Survivability here was not a headline. It was procedure and training, multiplied by repetition. The next test came fast. At the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, 26 October 1942, Rear Admiral Thomas C. Kincaid's TF-16 faced the main body of the Japanese carrier force. Hornet took mortal wounds and would be finished by enemy attack and scuttling attempts. Enterprise took two 250-kilo bomb hits that jammed her forward elevator, killed and wounded scores, and set new fires across scarred steel. Despite that, she recovered aircraft, fought through additional waves, and, by afternoon, stood as the only operational U.S. fleet carrier in the South Pacific. The U.S. withdrew the surviving force. Enterprise lived to launch again. This is the moral of the section. Damage control and afloat repair converted survival into continued presence. Dates and details. 26 Okinawa 1942. 2 bomb hits. Kincaid's withdrawal are documented in NHHC's Santa Cruz studies and the Enterprise War Damage Report. Across these first 11 months, Deck 1941, OCT 1942, Enterprise illustrates a pattern that Japanese staff officers would come to fear. The ship that would not remain sunk or sidelined. Commissioned 12 May 1938. At sea 7 Deck 1941. Doolittle 18 April 1942. Midway Fort 6 June 1942. Eastern Solomons 24 Aug. Santa Cruz 26. OKT. Each date equals a test of systems and people. Each test ties to a commander's choice. Halsey pushing far enough for Doolittle. Spruance, Fletcher, and air group leaders at Midway. Kincaid fighting and then preserving the last deck at Santa Cruz. The background is set. Enterprise's reputation, the carrier Japan couldn't kill, did not spring from myth. It came from recorded hits, logged repairs, and repeated returns to the line, with names, numbers, and dates attached. Enterprise's survival after Santa Cruz, 26 October 1942, did not earn her a rest. It earned her a role. Keep the Solomons campaign alive, while the rest of the carrier force rebuilt. In November, during the naval battle of Guadalcanal, and 12–15 November 1942, she operated as the only operational U.S. fleet carrier in the theater, flying continuous cap and strike sorties over the transports and damaged surface forces off Savo and Lunga. Across those 4 days, Enterprise launched and recovered in dirty weather, ferried spare aircraft to Henderson Field, and kept ammunition moving across a deck still scarred from October. 2 numbers framed the stakes. Guadalcanal had to be held in November 1942, and the U.S. Navy had 1 flight deck to help hold it. Repairs came piecemeal, not ceremonial. Between sorties, she took voyage fixes alongside tenders at Noumea and Espiritu Santo, her crews and attached CVs cutting out twisted planking and rewiring scorched trunks so that aircraft fueling and arming cycles could return to rhythm. The causal chain was visible in the logbook. Damage control culture, plus afloat repair capacity. Flight operations restored without leaving the theater. That equation, first proved at Eastern Solomons, 24 Aug. 1942, and Santa Cruz, 26 Octu 1942, is the reason Enterprise kept appearing on battle. Maps where Japanese planners assumed no U.S. carrier could reappear so quickly. By early 1943, the Solomons fight had shifted from crisis to grind. Enterprise cycled strikes and caps through the Russell Islands phase and then rearmed for the Central Pacific thrust. In November 1943, she supported the Gilbert's campaign as U.S. forces assaulted Tarawa, 20 to 23 November. Chidu Chiludhabri to Aintrabu, flying fighter cover and anti-submarine patrols around the invasion convoys and supporting carriers. 2 months later, she joined the Marshall's offensive, covering landings at Kwajalein and Roy Namer, 34 September, 3rd January 3rd February 1944, and providing the air umbrella while construction battalions turned lagoons into forward bases. Cause, effect. The same ship that absorbed bomb hits in 1942 was now part of a system, standardized air groups, trained deck crews, and escort screens that could open an atoll, hold it, and move on. The next demonstration of that system came at Truk Lagoon, Operation Hailstone, 17th–18th February 1944. Enterprise's air group helped pound what had been Japan's Fortress Fleet Base. Hundreds of sorties over 2 days, dozens of ships sunk or beached, and airfields cratered across the atoll. The tactical point is clear, but the strategic one is sharper. By February 1944, U.S. carriers could stage deep strikes on consecutive days because the logistics train, oilers, ammunition ships, repair tenders, matched the tempo of the flight decks. Enterprise, which had survived because of damage control, was now lethal because of continuity. Through spring-summer 1944, Enterprise sailed with the fast carrier formations, supporting the Marianas Campaign, Saipan Landings 15th June 1944, Battle of the Philippine Sea 19–20 June, then the strikes that bracketed the Philippines. In October 1944, she flew with the carriers that broke Japanese naval power at Leyte Gulf, 23–26 October, contributing to the decoy's destruction off Cap Engano, 25 October, while other U.S. groups fought at Sibuyan Sea, Surigao Strait, and off Samar. Across those months, the pattern hardened. Radar-directed Cap Po Plus practiced deck crews plus afloat logistics, a flight deck that rarely went silent. Enterprise also evolved. Late 1943, she received modifications and equipment to pioneer sustained night operations. By 1944–45, she embarked a dedicated night air group and flew as the fleet's night carrier, recovering late strikes, intercepting dusk intruders, and providing after-dark CAP over anchorage and amphibious forces. The causal link to survivability is subtle but real. Night recovery competence lowers cumulative operational risk and keeps aircraft and aircrew returning to the fight. It also extended the fleet's striking day by hours, which, multiplied across campaigns, meant more pressure on Japanese logistics and airfields. Then came the last, hardest season. During the Kyushu and Kure strikes in March 1945, the opening blows of the campaign that would culminate at Okinawa, landings 1st April 1945. Enterprise absorbed bomb damage that blew in plating near the forward elevator and killed and wounded men topside. She fought on. On 11th April 1945, amid the massed kamikaze effort to break the Okinawa invasion, she took another hit that buckled sections of the flight deck and interrupted operations until emergency patches could be laid. The worst arrived on 14th May 1945, when a suicide aircraft exploded near the forward elevator well, destroying the lift, tearing open the deck, and forcing Enterprise back for major repairs. Dates. Consequences. After years of returning from punishment, the 14 May damage finally sidelined her at the end of the war's last great amphibious battle. Even that exit underlined the theme. Between 26th October 1942, when she stood alone after Santa Cruz, and 14th May 1945, when a kamikaze finally drove her from the line, Enterprise's record is a string of specific days where procedures, people, and material made a ship endure. She had carried a flag at Santa Cruz, covered the decisive surface nights off Guadalcanal, 12-15 Nov 1942, flown through Tarawa, Nov 1943, Kwajalein, Jan Feb 1944, Truk, Feb 1944, Philippine Sea, June 1944, Leyte, Oct 1944, and then Okinawa, Apar May 1945. The statistics that will follow, battle stars, enemy aircraft downed, ships sunk, are not abstractions. They are the ledger lines of a carrier that Japan tried to erase and could not. The stage is set for the deeper analysis. Next, we break down the angles that explain why she kept returning. The technologies that bought minutes, the training that converted minutes into survival, the human routines that turned survival into presence, and the enemy reactions that confirmed the effect. Enterprise's survivability began with sensors and what her people did with them. By 1942, U.S. fleet carriers were operating air search radar and formal fighter direction teams. Enterprise built a habit of turning early contacts into altitude heading calls that stacked her cape where it mattered. The payoff is visible in two operations on the calendar. During Eastern Solomons, 24 Aug 1942, Enterprise absorbed bomb hits, yet kept cycling fighters because radar warning and direction reduced leakers and bought time for damage control to work. The Navy's photo and action summary record the 24 August deck explosions and the fact that the battle was fought entirely by carrier aircraft. 2 years later, in the Kyushu strikes, 18–20 Mar 1945, Enterprise sailed as part of a night carrier task group, furnishing nightcap over the force as fast carriers hit home island airfields. The official War History 1941–45 notes her mission. Those dates and lists 6 enemy-caused damage events across the war, 13 hits, near misses. Cause, effect, radar, plus fighter direction by minutes. Minutes let CAPI intercept, gunners set up, and damage control stay ahead, converting survivability into sustained flight ops. Quantitative contrast. At Eastern Solomons, the sides never sighted each other. Every attack was radar found, air delivered, underscoring why early warning mattered on 24 August 1942. In March 1945, the same logic governed at night. A carrier with organized fighter direction can protect not only herself, but the formation, extending the fleet's usable day. Enterprise's legend came from what happened after the hits. The Navy's compiled damage history states she was damaged by the enemy on 6 separate occasions, including bombs and kamikazes, yet she repeatedly restored flight operations without leaving the theater. The inflection points are precise. On 26 October 1942, Santa Cruz, 2 250-kilo bombs jammed her forward elevator and set new fires. Despite that, she recovered aircraft and, after Hornet went down, stood as the only operational U.S. fleet carrier left in the South Pacific that evening. That single fact explains why her damage control culture mattered. It turned a wounded deck into the theater's last airfield at sea. The same pattern recurs in 1945. Enterprise was locally repaired after bomb damage on 13 March 1945 and kamikaze damage on 11 April 1945, but a catastrophic 14 May 1945 suicide blast at the forward elevator finally forced her home. Cause, effect, trained DC teams plus forward tenders, rapid sortie restoration. When cumulative structural damage exceeded what could be patched alongside, operations stopped. 3 dated data points: 13 Mar, 11 April, 14 May. Make the threshold visible. Quantitative contrast. Many ships survive one hard hit. Enterprise returned again and again, a difference documented by the Navy's tally of 6 major enemy damage episodes over the war, and her presence on critical dates, e.g., 26 Oct 1942, when the theater hinged on a single flight deck. Enterprise did more than endure daylight. By late 1944, she received a special night operations air group, becoming the fleet's dedicated night carrier, CV-6N, in practice, through 31 San Saturn. May 1945. The DNFS photo note and ship history summarize her role. With a night air group aboard by December 1944, she covered the Luzon phase, South China Sea raids, Iwo Jima, home island strikes, and Okinawa, recovering late strikes and intercepting dusk intruders when other decks were securing. Cause, effect. Night recovery competence, plus night cap, Gabri's longer striking day, and fewer unopposed enemy twilight attacks. The concept wasn't theoretical. During Operation Hailstone against Truk, Astuntintodio, Andraf on Frinfweiten Tuabetoindredrins, Entity Dan Torfind for 1924, Enterprise's fighter squadron VF-10 is credited in NHHC's caption with 14 Japanese aircraft destroyed during the raids, and H-grams tie Hailstone's timing to the Marshall Islands offensives, Operation Catchpole, CTD-Ditana and K-Turin I-2, illustrating how continuous carrier pressure across day-night cycles collapsed a fortress base in 48 hours. Cause, effect. A carrier that can strike and screen after dark reduces the enemy's recovery window and multiplies attrition. Quantitative contrast. A day-only deck yields perhaps 10 to 12 effective launch recovery windows. A night-capable deck adds recovery and interception blocks in the 18-2 span. Enterprise's formal documentation of night carrier operations. 24 Deck 1944-31, May 1945, shows those extra windows existed and were staffed. Enterprise's operations calendar is its own argument. In the Doolittle Raid, 18 April 1942, she screened Hornet under TF-16, VADM William F. Halsey. Hyperwar preserves the CV-8 action report with the 18 April launch and radar contacts that morning. 2 years later, in the Central Pacific Machine, she was on the flight line for Hailstone, 17 to 18 Feb. 1944, and then the Marianas, Saipan D-Day, 15th of June, 1944, and the Philippine Sea Air Battle, 19 to 20 June. Cause, effect. A carrier that survives 1942 via DC and direction becomes a carrier that enables 1944 by continuity. Same hull, different tempo. Enterprise's record also measures outcomes. The NHHC Enterprise War History Summary credits her with participation in sinking 3 large Japanese carriers and a heavy cruiser at Midway, June 1942, and a battleship, a large cruiser, and 4 carriers at Leyte Gulf, Oct. 1944, language that reflects her air group's contribution across multi-carrier strikes. The macro result appears in decorations, 20 battle stars, Presidential Unit Citation, and Navy Unit Commendation, repeatedly described by NHHC as making Enterprise the most decorated U.S. warship of WTOTC. Cause, effect, survive, show up, accumulate decisive days, accumulate the record. From the Japanese side, Enterprise's story reads like a sequence of kills that never held. After Eastern Solomons, 24 August 1942, strike leaders reported heavy damage, 3 direct bomb hits on CV-6, and fires visible from altitude. Post-action claims circulated through carrier staffs attached to Shokaku and Zuikaku, the same decks that would meet Enterprise again at Santa Cruz, 26 October 1942. There, Japanese dive bombers scored 2 250 hits, and additional near-miss damage. American radio traffic about casualties and a jammed forward elevator suggested a ship out of action. Yet within days, Enterprise was flying again over the naval battle of Guadalcanal, 12 to 15 November 1942, the lone U.S. fleet carrier covering the transports off Lunga. Cause, effect. Japanese strike success created damage. U.S. damage control doctrine and afloat repair created continuity. 2 calendar anchors, 24, AUG and 26 Oct 1942, frame. The enemy's recurring shock when a finished ship reappeared. Enterprise's reappearance repeated in 1944-45. After the Kyushu Kure strikes, 18 to 20th March 1945, Japanese pilots reported bomb damage on a U.S. carrier with the island layout of CV-6. Kamikaze attacks then struck the same silhouette on 11 April 1945, and again, catastrophically, on 14 May 1945, near the forward elevator. Even then, when Enterprise finally withdrew for major yard work, U.S. carrier strength in theater did not slacken. Task Force 5838 rotated fresh decks into the line. Cause, effect. Knocking one carrier aside in 1945 no longer changed tempo. American manpower and logistics absorbed the loss. Dates, itintuentit marchaids, ernstia pri, 14 May, 5, 14 May, 1945, mark how the enemy's tactical hits no longer produced strategic pauses. Numbers don't patch steel. Sailors do. On 26 October 1942, when 2 bombs tore into Enterprise at Santa Cruz, repair parties moved under smoke and flame to shore bulkheads, re-rig power, and clear the landing area. By nightfall, with Hornet, CV-8, mortally wounded, Enterprise's deck crews recovered aircraft and kept the last U.S. fleet deck in the South Pacific open. 4 days later, those same hands were fueling and arming for the 12-15 November fighting off Guadalcanal. Cause, effect, trained damage control teams, plus drilled ordnance crews. Survival, presence, dates and roles are inseparable from the outcome. In 1943-44, Seabees and repair tenders at Noumea and Espiritu Santo cut out torn plating between sorties. In November 1943 and January, February 1944, the ship was back on the line for Tarawa, 20 to 23 Nov, and Kwajalein, Roy Namur, 31 Jan 3 Feb. The tempo these crews sustained becomes obvious when you follow the calendar into 17 to 18 February 1944, Truk, Hailstone, and 15 to 25 June 1944, Marianas, Philippine Sea, without long yard absences. Cause, effect, afloat repair capacity, plus standardized procedures, days on station that kept Enterprise visible in every major phase. Enterprise's endurance is not superstition. It is doctrine. The U.S. Navy entered the war with formalized damage control syllabi, widespread radar adoption, air search sets entering service by 1940-41, and a developing fighter direction method that turned early warning into altitude heading cues for CAP. Those 3 elements, DC, radar, fighter direction, appear in every major Enterprise engagement. At Eastern Solomons, 24 Aug 1942, radar warning narrowed leakers before bombs hit. DC contained fires quickly enough to resume operations. At Santa Cruz, 26 Aug 1942, despite 2 direct hits, elevator casualties, and multiple fires, organized parties stabilized the ship and preserved the flight deck for recovery. Cause, effect. Doctrine preloaded the outcome. Training made it repeatable. Culture finished what doctrine started. By late 1944, Enterprise had embraced night operations, embarking a night air group to recover late strikes and catch dusk intruders through 31 non-fine 25 Tarn May 1945. That decision added hours to the striking day across Luzon, Iwo Jima, from 1900, Crower Fine 1950, Itaw di Tihi Twive and Okinawa, from 1st April 1945. It is a small text in a large book, but it multiplies the pressure on an enemy already short of fuel and pilots. Cause, effect. Night carrier role. Longer pressure windows. Fewer safe hours for the opponent. By the end, Enterprise's ledger matched her legend. She earned 20 battle stars in the Pacific and is widely recognized as the most decorated U.S. Navy ship of World War II. Her wartime damage log lists 6 separate enemy damage events, bombs and kamikazes. Yet she kept returning until the 14th May 1945 elevator well blast finally sent her home. In operations lists, you can draw a straight line from Doolittle, 18 April 1942, to Midway, 4 to 6 June 1942, to Leyte Gulf, 23 to 26 October 1944, with CV-6 present for each hinge. Cause, effect. Repeated presence at decision points, cumulative credit, awards, and the enduring epithet, the carrier Japan couldn't kill. The enemy noticed. After Santa Cruz, Japanese communiques celebrated the destruction of U.S. carrier strength. After Guadalcanal, Nov 12 to 15, they faced Enterprise again. After March-May 1945, they struck the same silhouette 3 times in 2 months, only to see U.S. carrier aviation maintain pressure over Okinawa anyway. In a war where perception guided planning, Enterprise's habit of reappearing distorted the enemy's expectations and morale. Cause, effect, failed kills, planning uncertainty, operational caution when time favored the United States. Together, these angles complete the mechanism behind the myth. Sensors bought minutes. Fighters turned minutes into fewer hits. Damage control turned hits into survivable wounds. Afloat repair turned survival into continuity. Night operations turned continuity into tempo. And the calendar, 26 Oct 1942. 25 Nov 1942, 17-18 Feb 1944. Yemanger 20 June 1941. Alternate Mar Indici April. 14th May 1945 records the proof in days the enemy could not erase. October 1942. Aero 7 to 40 Tandrid Tiafoa 12 Sain Quadrant off the Santa Cruz Islands. Task Force 16 turns into the wind. Rear Admiral Thomas C. Kincaid flies his flag in USS Enterprise, CV-6. USS Hornet, CV-8, steams in the adjacent group. The enemy comes in waves. Aichi D-3A Val, dive bombers, and Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo planes launched from Shokaku and Zuikaku, with land-based support out of the Northern Solomons. By noon, the ledger is brutal and documented. Hornet is fatally hit and will be abandoned. Enterprise is struck by 2 250 kilo bombs, her forward elevator jammed and sections of the flight deck torn open. Yet her engines answer, her rudder holds, and she keeps recovering aircraft. Data points. Date 26 Oct 1942. 2 bomb hits on CV-6. Hornet lost the same day. Cause, effect. Damage control doctrine and drilled repair parties prevent secondary fires from cascading. Fuel lines are isolated. Ruptured wiring is bypassed. Deck crews clear a recovery lane across scarred planking. When Kincaid orders the force to disengage, Enterprise is the only operational U.S. fleet carrier left in the South Pacific. That single fact changes behavior. American transports and surface groups now depend on one flight deck for long-range cover. 7 to 31. October 1942. Noumea and Espiritu Santo. Enterprise does not disappear into a long yard period. She takes voyage repairs alongside tenders, with Seabees and ship fitters cutting out buckled plating and re-rigging power to the forward deck edge. The ship logs show the rhythm. Repair by day. Trials at dusk. Aviation gas lines tested under watch. Data points, 5-day afloat patch cycle. Forward elevator still compromised, but a clear landing area restored. Turte fighting. November 1942, the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. 4 dates, 1 verdict. 2:13 Nov. First Naval Battle. Rear Admiral Daniel J. Callaghan's night surface action wrecks both sides. Hiei is left crippled and will be finished by air attack at dawn. Enterprise's flyers, SBDs and TBFs, find and batter the battleship as she drifts north of Savo. Data points. Night of 12/13. Nov. Hiei sunk 13 Nov after repeated strikes. Nov. Day actions. U.S. air groups smash a major Japanese reinforcement convoy. Enterprise sorties keep pressure on cruisers and transports trying to run the slot. To 15. Nov. Second Naval Battle. Vice Admiral William F. Halsey commits USS Washington, BB-56, and USS South Dakota, BB-57, under Rear Admiral Willis A. Lee. In the early hours of 15 Nov, Washington sinks Kirishima by radar-directed gunfire. Data points. Battleship Kirishima sunk 15 Non. Sedentert. Winterfady. Washington the shooter. Across these 4 days, Enterprise's battered deck recovers, refuels, and relaunches aircraft to cover the transports and the damaged American surface forces off Lunga. With Hornet gone and Saratoga absent, CV-6 is the air umbrella that closes the loop. Survival at Santa Cruz, presence over Guadalcanal, Japanese withdrawal from a campaign they cannot supply by day. The causal chain is not poetic, it is procedural. Keeping one carrier alive kept a theater alive. Why Santa Cruz is the hinge. Santa Cruz could have ended with 2 U.S. fleet carriers sunk and the Central Solomons open to reinforcement. Instead, the outcome is split. Hornet lost, Enterprise damaged but functional. The difference is measured in minutes. Minutes that radar warning gave to combat air patrol to break up attacks. Minutes that firefighting teams used to kill flames beneath the flight deck. Minutes that aircraft handling crews used to clear the landing area. Those minutes are the practical meaning of the carrier Japan couldn't kill. Operational geometry, November 1942. With CV-6 alone on station, the U.S. cannot risk her recklessly. That changes tactics. Enterprise flies cap heavy and searchlight, guards the anchorage off Lunga, and ferries spare aircraft into Henderson Field when weather allows. She becomes a force multiplier rather than a glory ship, a deck that makes cruisers braver and transports perfectly timed. 2 verifiable anchors, dates 1215. Nov 1913, done at the 1942. Hiei and Kirishima both lost within 48 hours to a mix of air and radar-directed gunnery that a functioning U.S. flight deck helps script. What the enemy sees. Japanese carrier staffs had claimed crippling damage on 24 Oct 1942, Eastern Solomons, and again on 26 Oct 1942. Their communiques implied the American carrier force finished. Yet by 12:15 Nov, Enterprise's air group is back overhead, spotting, striking, and escorting. The contradiction is psychological. Each kill fails to change the map. That gap, tactical success without strategic effect, is where Enterprise lives, from survival to doctrine. The November 1942 Gandiawantuwandi Faintin Siren Fortnight makes 2 truths permanent. First, damage control is not an emergency measure. It is a way of fighting. Second, afloat repair is a weapon. Tenders at Numea, Espiritu Santo, and depot ships forward can turn out of action into ready by dawn. Enterprise's logs in late T20s, October and early November show those truths in steel. 5-day patch cycle after 26 to Octi. Deck partially restored. Flight operations in time for the 12-15 Novi battles. The bridge to 1944. Because CV-6 survives 1942, she is there when the war turns industrial. She flies at Tarawa, 20-23 Nov 1943. Covers Kwajalein Roy Namur, 30 Waran John 3 Feb 1944. Helps hammer Truk in Operation Hailstone on 17-18 Feb 1944, and is on the line for Saipan, 15 June 1944, and the Battle of the Philippine Sea, 19-20 June 1944. Each later date is the dividend of two earlier ones, 26 Oct 1942 and 12-15 Nov 1942. The turn in one sentence: Japan tried to finish Enterprise when one more deck would have broken the South Pacific. Instead, 2 bombs on 26th October became 4 days of flight ops in November, and those 4 days helped close the book on a campaign Japan could not resupply under American air. The climax will not end here. Because the ship that would not die in 1942 will be asked to do one more impossible thing in 1945, fly into home island skies, take March bombs, absorb April and May kamikaze strikes, and still keep the fleet's night watch until a final blast at the forward elevator ends her war. And that takes us to the second turning point, 8-20 March 1945, the home islands strikes. The Fifth Fleet moves under Admiral Raymond A. Spruance. The fast carriers, Task Force 58, under Vice Admiral Mark A. Meacher, drive for Kyushu and Kure to smash airfields before Okinawa D-Day, 1st April 1945. Enterprise is present in a new role. The fleet's night carrier embarked with a dedicated night air group to extend the striking day past sunset. On 18th of March, heavy raids rake aircraft plants and fields across northern Kyushu. On 19th to 20th of March, the carriers return, and the Japanese respond with massed counterattacks. In the blur of sirens and contrails, a bomb finds Enterprise near the forward elevator, blasting plate and cable runs and scattering deck crews. She keeps station, recovers aircraft after dark, and writes the purpose of her new assignment in simple terms: buy the fleet the night. Cause, effect. Night operations turn a 12-hour air plan into an 18-hour air plan. The same hull that survived 26th October 1942 now converts darkness into protection and recovery windows, reducing losses from dusk attacks and keeping pressure on airfields that would otherwise rise again at dawn. 2 anchors fix the moment. TF-58 strikes on 18-20 March 1945, bomb damage that does not remove Enterprise from the line. April 1945. Okinawa begins. At 08:30 on L-Day, transports open their doors off Hagushi beaches. Enterprise's nightcap clears the last intruders of the morning, and then stands by for after-dark recovery as the day carriers feed continuous sorties into the lodgment. Around her, the numbers tell the scale. Over 1,300 ships deployed for Operation Iceberg. 10 U.S. fast carriers at peak on rotation. Scores of destroyers stretched thin on radar picket lines. In this geometry, one deck that can fly at night is more than a ship. It is time itself. Time for the fleet to reorganize, to refuel, to patch holes before the next day's push. April 1945. The first kamikaze. Hit. The weather is broken, and the barometer dropping when a suicide aircraft claws through flak and plunges toward Enterprise's bow. The impact and detonation slam the flight deck forward, buckling plating and hurling men across steel. Fires take, hoses answer. Within minutes, the ship's forward deck edge is a workshop, shoring, cutting, rigging new runs, so that the aft deck can be used to trap returning aircraft. By evening, the captain can report the ship able to conduct limited flight operations. Two facts in one line. Date 11th April 1945. Flight ops resumed the same day. Cause, effect. The formal damage control syllabus. Watertight integrity drills. Casualty power rigging. Gasoline system isolation. Translates to minutes saved and sorties recovered. On a day when picket destroyers are being swarmed and the amphibious force cannot pause, those minutes change behavior across the formation. Late April 1945. The grind. Okinawa becomes attrition without metaphor. Enterprise cycles night. Cap and night recovery, while the day carriers hammer airfields at Kagoshima, Kanoya, and Kanuya. Logistic ships slide forward. Oilers push hoses out under blacked-out booms. Tenders catalog spares that will run out before the weather does. The carrier's log reads like an accountant's ledger. Sorties flown, arrests made, rounds expended, casualties treated, but the effect is psychological as much as arithmetic. If it is night, the fleet is not blind. May 1945. The elevator well. Just after midday, another kamikaze bores in low. The aircraft hits near the forward elevator and detonates down the shaft. The shock lifts steel. The fire blasts upward through the lift well. Deck planks and framing go with it. Where there had been a platform, there is a crater open to smoke and sky. Casualty reports run in clipped lines. Burns, blast, shrapnel, followed by the words that Enterprise has avoided for 3 years. Ship is unfit for further combat operations until dockyard repairs. The date is certain. The consequence is final. Cause, effect. 3 data points close the arc. 18 to 20 March bomb damage. 11 April kamikaze. 14 May catastrophic hit. And explain the threshold between afloat repair and yard work. Damage control can isolate shore and rig. It cannot fabricate a new elevator and flight deck girders at sea. For a night carrier, an elevator well detonation is not merely a hole, it is the loss of launch recovery rhythm that defines the ship's reason for being. What commanders do with the news. Mitcher and Spruance do not change the Okinawa plan. Task Force 58 shifts night coverage among available units. Additional destroyer pickets receive fighters earlier each dusk. Deck cycles redistribute to keep pressure on airfields feeding kamikaze Kikusui waves. The strategic effect of Enterprise's removal is unfortunate, not fatal, because the U.S. Navy of 1945 fights by system, not singularity. That, too, is part of CV-6's legacy. She helped carry the fleet to a place where even the loss of a legend does not change the calendar. Enemy sightlines. From Kyushu's air ops huts, the spring looks different. Reports list a carrier with island configuration consistent with Enterprise damaged on 18 to 20 March, struck again on 11th April, and finally seen burning forward on 14th May. The message traffic celebrates. The front does not move. By the end of May, Okinawa is a siege. In June, the island is secured. In July, the fast carriers are ranging over the inland sea. The ship the Japanese tried hardest to finish has, in a way, already done what she was built to do. Turn ship endurance into operational endurance until the broader system can function without her. One deck, 2 wars. Enterprise fought 2 kinds of war and had to win both. The first was 1942, a narrow war of survival where one more hole in one more deck might decide a theater. The second was 1945, a wide war of systems where victory depended on rhythm and reach more than single-ship heroics. The dates that name her turning points, 26, Oct. 1942, and 14th May 1945, bookend that transformation. In the first, survival kept Guadalcanal alive. In the second, removal did not collapse Okinawa. The difference is not contradiction, it is proof of growth. What Japan couldn't kill finally means. It never meant invulnerable. It meant that again and again, Japan achieved the tactical part. Bomb hits at Eastern Solomons, 2 bombs at Santa Cruz, bomb damage 18 to 20 March 1945, kamikazes 11th April and 14th May, but could not achieve the strategic part. Erase her presence from the place and the moment where it mattered. When they finally blew out her forward elevator in May, the campaign she had guarded was already decided. The flight deck is quiet as tugs ease alongside. Fires are out. The wind over the bow is only wind. The ship will head east for repairs, carrying a manifest of numbers that will define her in the official record, and a set of days that already defined her in the war. The war kept score in ledgers, and Enterprise CV-6 wrote her totals in columns that outlived the noise. Start with the official count. The Naval History and Heritage Command records that her planes and guns downed 911 enemy aircraft. Her bombers sank 71 ships and damaged or destroyed 192 more. The same entry calls her the most decorated warship of World War II, with 20 battle stars, 3 more than any other ship, and uniquely, both a Presidential Unit Citation and a Navy Unit Commendation for WU2 service. These are not slogans. They're audited figures. Now trace those numbers back to days on the calendar. On 24th August 1942, at the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, Enterprise took bomb hits yet recovered. A fight NHHC sums up with one stark operational fact. U.S. and Japanese ships never sighted each other. It was a radar and aviation duel end to end. That made fighter direction and damage control the difference between an air group that flies again and one that doesn't. Cause? Effect. Early warning shaved leakers. DC contained fires fast enough to keep the deck alive. Enterprise did both on 24 August and lived to fight 10 weeks later. Those 10 weeks delivered 26th October 1942, Santa Cruz, 2 250-kilo hits, a forward elevator jammed, and Hornet, CV-8, lost the same day. NHHC's battle summary calls Enterprise severely damaged, while detailed narratives list 44 killed and 75 wounded in the bombing that jammed the elevator in the up position. The effect is visible by nightfall. Hornet is gone. Enterprise is the only operational U.S. fleet carrier left in the South Pacific. Cause, effect. Trained DC teams plus a float repair at Noumea, Espiritu Santo, turned severely damaged into present over Guadalcanal inside a fortnight. Dates plus details. 26 Octi 1942 damage, 12/15, Nov 1942, Enterprise flying through the naval battle of Guadalcanal. By February 1944, the same ship that survived 1942 was part of a system that destroyed fortresses. In Operation Hailstone, 17 to 18 Feb 1944, Enterprise's VF-10 pilots are credited by NHHC with 14 Japanese aircraft destroyed during the 2-day raid on Truk. Cause, effect, a flight deck kept alive in 1942 becomes a multiplier in 1944, able to stage deep strikes because the fleet's oilers, tenders, and standardized procedures matched her tempo. The final season proves the other half of the ledger. How much punishment it took to stop her from flying. The Bureau of Ships War Damage Compendium lists 6 enemy damage events across the war. First, Feb. 1942, Marshall Islands. Auch 1942, Eastern Solomons. 26 Oct. 1942, Santa Cruz. 18 and 20, Mar 1945, Southern Japan strikes. 11 April 1945, Kamikaze, Okinawa. And 14 May 1945, Kamikaze near Kyushu. The last, the catastrophic elevator well detonation that finally sent her home. Cause, effect. DC and forward repair could restore flight ops after March 18 to 20 bombing and April 11th kamikaze. May 14 exceeded what could be fabricated at sea. Even sidelined, her institutional role was already complete. Beginning December 1944, Enterprise operated as the fleet's night carrier. The period December 1944 to May 1945, documented in the ship's night operations analysis and reflected in DAN-FS-linked histories. That decision extended the fleet's striking day into darkness for the Luzon, Iwo Jima from 1953 1945 and Okinawa from Tarapar 1945 phases. Cause, effect, night. Cap and Recovery denied the enemy's favored twilight window and bought the amphibious force uninterrupted. Tempo until 14th May. 1945 blew out the forward elevator and ended her combat cruise. Awards closed the account, but they also decode it. NHHC's official Big E page consolidates what scattered deck logs imply. 20 battle stars, PUC plus Nuki, and, on 23rd of November 1945, the rare British Admiralty pennant, making Enterprise the only ship outside the Royal Navy so honored. Read together. Those lines explain the nickname the enemy inadvertently helped write. The Japanese announced her sinking more than once, yet she kept returning. NHHC's summary even repeats the totals. 911 enemy aircraft, 71 ships sunk, 192 damaged, destroyed. Cause, effect. Repeated reappearance at decision points accumulates results and decorations at a pace no other ship matched. There is a symmetry in her last assignments. After the 14 May 1945 hit ended combat service, Enterprise shifted to magic carpet voyages, bringing thousands home. The same sailors whose logistics had kept her fueled and armed since 1942. The NHHC exhibit and image collections place her in that quiet role by late 1945. The war's arithmetic now running in reverse. Dates anchor it, 23 Nov 1945 for the Admiralty pennant. Decommissioning February 1947. Scrapping completed by 1960 after preservation efforts failed. Cause, effect. A ship built to endure battle ended by ferrying endurance back to families, then gave up her steel to time. Add the numbers once more, not to gild them, but to see why the carrier Japan couldn't kill is a statement of record. 6 recorded enemy damage events. 2 climactic dates that define her arc. 26 Oct 1942 and 14 May 1945. 20 battle stars. 911, 71, 192 in aircraft and ships. The tallies do not make her immortal. They make her indispensable on the days that decided the Pacific. The last act of Enterprise's war reads like an epilogue written in dates and ribbons. Okinawa closed on 22 June 1945, 5 weeks after the 14 May elevator well blast that finally forced CV-6 east for dockyard work. By then, her purpose had already been fulfilled. She had carried the fleet through the hinge from crisis to system, from Santa Cruz, 26 Octi 1942, to the all-hours, all-weather machine of 1945. The numbers that follow are not decoration. They are summary. On 23 November 1945, the Royal Navy presented Enterprise with the Admiralty Pennant, a rare honor for a non-British warship, awarded for her sustained service alongside Allied fleets. In U.S. accounting, she closed the books with 20 battle stars, 1 Presidential Unit citation, and 1 Navy Unit commendation, formal recognition that ties back to the operations calendar we have walked. Doolittle, Chariot 18 April 1942, Midway, 4-6 June 1942, Eastern Solomons, 21 auch 1942, Santa Cruz, 26 Oct 1942, Guadalcanal, 12-15 Nov 1942, Hailstone, Truk, 17-18 Feb 1944, Philippine Sea, 19-20 June 1944, Leyte Gulf, 23-26 Oche-2-44, and the Kyushu-Okinawa season, 18 to 20 Mar, ends April, 14 May fine weather for an introiden, or 13-45. Two anchors define the arc, 26th October 1942, when she stood as the only operational U.S. fleet carrier left in the South Pacific, 14th May 1945, when a kamikaze finally tore out the forward elevator and ended her combat cruise. Between those poles, she shifted from combat to return. With the guns quiet, Enterprise joined Operation Magic Carpet in late 1945, hauling veterans back across the Pacific by the thousands. The causal thread is exact. A ship kept alive by damage control and afloat repair during 1942–44 now spent her last quiet months returning the manpower that had kept her alive. In a war famous for its vast totals, Magic Carpet gave men their personal ones, dates on tickets home, not on battle maps. Post-war, the Navy tried to preserve the hull that had become a ledger of the Pacific. Enterprise decommissioned on 17th February 1947, entering reserve at Bayonne, New Jersey. Committees formed, funds were pledged, plans drafted for a floating museum, yet steel has its own schedule. After 11 Pacific campaign stars in her first 3 years and 9 more through 1945, there was no peacetime budget to hold the weight. Sold for scrapping on 1st July 1958, she was dismantled over the next 2 years. By 1960, the plates were gone. The artifacts that remain, the nameplate, the bell, sections of deck, are not ghosts. They are references, pointing back to the dates when a ship's procedures became a fleet's margin. Measured strictly, her career ends in 3 lines. Commissioned 12th May 1938, decommissioned 17th February 1947, scrapping completed by 1960. Measured properly, it ends where it began, on operations pages where cause and effect are visible. Radar and fighter direction turned warnings into minutes. Damage control turned minutes into survival. Afloat repair turned survival into presence. Night operations turned presence into tempo. Allied logistics turned tempo into horizons that did not move back. The data sit plainly in her official totals. 911 enemy aircraft downed, 71 ships sunk, 192 more damaged or destroyed. And in the damage register that lists 6 enemy strikes, she absorbed and outlived until the last. Those numbers match the feeling her enemies recorded. Sunk in reports. Present again on the next day that counted. There is a final comparison worth stating once, cleanly. Japan sought a decisive battle. Enterprise denied it by reappearing at the decisive times. 36 Oct. 1942, 12 Nov. 1942, 17 18 Feb. 1944, 19 to 20 June 1944, 23 Q 20 Cs, Okinawa 1940, until the war became a sequence the enemy could not interrupt. When the elevator well blew out on 14th May 1945, the campaign she guarded, Okinawa, first upper 22 June 1945, was already past the point where one deck could change its end. So the ship left the line and took up a different work, returning sailors to the lives they had paused. The flight deck that had once recovered SBDs and F-6Fs now caught footsteps and suitcases. The same wind over the bow carried a quieter sound. After the awards were read and the pennant folded, she yielded her steel to the piece she had helped purchase. The ledger closes. The pattern stays. Procedure, survival, presence, tempo, decision. Enterprise did not live forever. She did something rarer. She lived long enough, on the right days, to prove that a system of people and practice can be harder to kill than a ship. History remembers Enterprise not as luck, but as discipline under pressure. Steel can be holed. Procedures can't, if you keep them alive. 2 dates hold the candle steady. On 26 October 1942, when Hornet, CV-8, was lost at Santa Cruz and Enterprise, CV-6, took two 250-kilo bomb hits, trained hands made the difference between a burning deck and a working runway. On 14th of May 1945, when a kamikaze detonated in the forward elevator well, the rupture finally exceeded what a float repair could patch. Yet by then, the Okinawa campaign, 1st April 22nd June 1945, had its own momentum. One day preserved a theater. Another proved the system could finish without her. Numbers give the feeling a spine. 20 battle stars, air and AA fire credited with 911 enemy aircraft downed. Air groups that sank 71 ships and destroyed 192 more. And on 23rd of November 1945, a final line most warships never earn. The British Admiralty Pennant, a foreign navy's salute to a carrier that kept showing up when it mattered. These are not decorations pinned to a myth. They are receipts for time bought under fire. The cause and effect never changes, only the scenery. Radar and fighter direction bought minutes. Damage control turned minutes into survival. Afloat repair turned survival into continuity. Night operations turned continuity into tempo. And tempo, sustained across Midway, 4 to 6 June 1942, Guadalcanal, 12 November 1942, Hailstone, 17 to 18, February 1944, Philippine Sea, 19th to 20th of June 1944, and Leyte Gulf, 23 to 26th of October 1944, became the quiet logic that Japan could not interrupt. Enemy communiques said she was finished after 24 August 1942, after 26 October 1942, again in March and April 1945. The map said otherwise. Enterprise kept returning, not because she was charmed, but because thousands of sailors treated routine like a weapon. That culture makes a hull feel immortal long enough to change outcomes. She did not survive the peace. Commissioned 12 May 1938, decommissioned 17 February 1947, scrapped by 1960, a life measured, in the end, by dates like anyone else's. But the shape she left behind is more durable than steel. A fleet that fights as a system, a standard that says endurance is planned, not prayed for. If you want to see her, look at any modern deck turning into the wind at dusk. The doctrine is hers, the rhythm is hers, and in the low light, when the landing area glows and the ship breathes in time with the sea, the lesson is still clear. Procedure, survival, presence, tempo, decision. That is why Japan couldn't kill Enterprise. That is why she still lives where it counts. If this made the war clearer, like now, subscribe, and comment the next operation you want. Your request becomes the next mission.